My name is Brielle Parker. I am 21 years old and this is my true story. This really happened to me and it completely changed my life. I once trusted someone deeply, but what they did to me was so shocking, so terrifying that I'm still haunted by it. Today I want you to know how betrayal can come from the people you love the most. What started as something small soon turned into a nightmare. I never imagined. If you really want to know how it all happened, then stay with me till the very end, because my story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And remember, this story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. My story begins 3 years ago, when my father remarried after my mother passed away. I was only 18 at the time, still trying to navigate my grief, and into our lives walked Vanessa, my stepmother, a woman who seemed charming on the surface with her polished smile and sweet words, but even back then something about her felt rehearsed. Like she was playing a role and waiting for the right time to reveal her true face. At first I tried to accept her. I didn't want to cause my dad more pain, and he looked so happy having someone beside him again. Vanessa was beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads everywhere. She went with glossy dark hair, emerald green eyes, and a voice that could melt stone. She made everyone believe she was kind, caring, and motherly, but when it was just me and her, I began to notice the cracks in her mask. She'd make little comments about how I was in the way, or how my dad deserved a fresh start without being reminded of the past. And though she said it with a smile, her eyes were always cold, piercing, like she wanted me gone. At first I brushed it off, thinking maybe I was overreacting, maybe it was just me being sensitive after losing my mom, but things got worse. She started controlling everything in the house, redecorating without asking, throwing out my mom's belongings under the excuse of decluttering, and whenever I protested, she'd twist the story to make me look like the selfish, ungrateful daughter who couldn't accept change. My dad, blinded by her charm, defended her every single time, telling me needed to grow up, to let go of the past, to give Vanessa a chance. That hurt more than I can explain, watching my father, the man I trusted most, slowly slipping away from me, falling deeper into Vanessa's spell. But it didn't stop there. Vanessa began leaving her poison into every part of my life. She controlled who I saw when I went out, even what I wore, always pretending it was for my own good. She'd tell my dad lies about me, that I was sneaking out, that I was failing school, that I was talking back to her constantly, and somehow he believed her. Every time I remember one night when I came home late from a friend's study group, Vanessa was waiting at the door with a sinister grin, and the moment my dad appeared, she burst into fake tears, accusing me of being out with boys, of disrespecting her rules. My dad yelled at me, grounded me, and I stood there in shock, realizing Vanessa had calculated the entire setup. She wasn't just trying to push me aside anymore, she was trying to erase me from my father's love. The more time passed, the darker her games became. She'd whisper cruel things to me when no one else was around. Your mother hated you, that's why she left you. Or your dad wishes you were never born, I'm just here to fix his mistake. I tried to tell my dad what she was doing, but Vanessa was always one step ahead, twisting my words, painting me as unstable, as jealous as the problem. The more I fought, the more he pulled away from me. One evening I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Vanessa was on the phone in the kitchen, and her voice was low but sharp. She said, "Don't worry, soon enough it'll all be mine. He won't even see it coming." I froze in the hallway, realizing she wasn't just after my father's love, she was after everything. His money, his home, his entire life. Suddenly the sweet stepmother act made sense. She wasn't just cruel for fun. She had a plan, and I was an obstacle standing in her way. That night I barely slept, my mind racing with thoughts of what she might do next. The more I watched her, the more I saw how dangerous she really was. She manipulated everyone around her, even neighbors and family friends, so that if I ever tried to expose her, no one would believe me. She was building an army of allies, and I was completely alone. Then strange things started happening in the house, things I couldn't explain. I'd wake up to my bedroom window wide open. When I was sure I had locked it, I'd find my belongings moved, or worse, missing. One night I woke to the smell of smoke and ran downstairs, only to find the stove burners turned on, a pot left heating with nothing in it. Vanessa stood in the kitchen doorway, smiling in the shadows, and whispered, "Be careful, accidents happen." That was the moment I realized she wasn't just trying to ruin my life emotionally, she wanted to destroy me physically. I tried telling my best friend Claire about what was going on, but even she seemed skeptical. Vanessa had already charmed her when she visited once, baking cookies, acting like the perfect mother figure. Claire told me I was probably just stressed, still dealing with grief, and maybe projecting my feelings. onto Vanessa that broke me inside because I realized Vanessa had outsmarted me in every way. She had turned me into the crazy one in everyone else's eyes. And yet I knew what I had seen, what I had heard, what I had felt. My instincts screamed at me that Vanessa was planning something horrific, something final. The scariest part came one night when I woke up in complete darkness and felt someone standing at the foot of my bed. My heart raced, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw her silhouette, her pale face barely visible, watching me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She whispered, "Sleep tight, Brielle, you won't be around much longer," before slipping out of my room. I wanted to scream to wake my dad, but fear paralyzed me, and by the time I ran into the hallway, she was gone. My dad brushed it off the next morning when I told him, accusing me of making up stories again. I knew then that I was completely on my own. Something terrible was coming, and I could feel it in my bones. Vanessa was patient, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and the more I tried to resist, the more she tightened her grip around me every night. I lay awake in fear, listening to the creaks of the house, wondering if this would be the night she finally made her move. And then one stormy night, it happened, the moment that changed everything, the moment that marked the beginning of my nightmare. The storm outside that night seemed to mirror the chaos inside me as I lay in bed, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest, every roll of thunder making the shadows in my room stretch and twist into monstrous shapes. And though I tried to convince myself that maybe I was imagining Vanessa's whisper, maybe exhaustion and paranoia were clouding my mind, deep down I knew the truth. She was planning something that would end with me either gone from the house forever or gone from this world entirely. Around midnight, I heard the sound of footsteps outside my door, slow, deliberate. Too heavy to be my dad's, too careful to be innocent. I held my breath as the doorknob turned ever so slightly, and then just as quickly it stopped, like someone wanted me to know. They were there, watching, waiting, enjoying the fear that paralyzed me. I didn't sleep at all that night, and when the sun finally rose, I stumbled out of my room to find Vanessa in the kitchen, humming to herself as she cooked breakfast, her face glowing with sweetness. As she kissed my father good morning, she glanced at me, her eyes locking onto mine for just a second, and the corners of her mouth twitched into the faintest smirk, like she was saying, "I own you and you can't do anything about it." I sat down across from them, feeling invisible as my dad laughed at her jokes, completely blind to the poison dripping from her words. Over the next few weeks, Vanessa tightened her grip in ways that made me feel suffocated. She convinced my father to give her control of the family finances, telling him it would take the burden off his shoulders. She convinced him to put her name on certain documents, saying it was for practical reasons. Whenever I tried to speak up, my dad would shut me down instantly, claiming Vanessa only wanted the best for us. It was like watching him fall under a spell he couldn't break. And then came the day that truly broke my trust in him. Vanessa claimed she found drugs in my backpack, a tiny bag of white powder that I had never seen before in my life. She handed it to my father with fake tears in her eyes, saying she was worried about me, that maybe I was falling in with the wrong crowd, that maybe my grief had led me down a dangerous path. My father's face turned red with anger as he screamed at me, accusing me of betraying him, of throwing my life away. I tried to explain, tried to tell him that Vanessa planted it. But no matter what I said, it was useless. Vanessa had already poisoned his mind against me. That night he threatened to send me to a rehab program if I didn't get my act together, and as I lay awake in my room, my fists clenched so tightly they hurt, I realized Vanessa wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. She was actively building a case to destroy me piece by piece, until my father abandoned me completely. But Vanessa made a mistake. She underestimated my strength, my will to survive. If she wanted me gone, she was going to have to work harder than this. I started watching her closely, documenting the little things she did, keeping a notebook hidden under my mattress, where I wrote down every lie she told, every cruel whisper, every suspicious phone call. I even recorded her once when she slipped into my room and hissed that I better pack my bags soon, because this house won't be mine much longer. But when I tried to show the recording to my father, the file had somehow been erased from my phone. That's when I knew Vanessa was one step ahead of me in every way. She must have found my phone, deleted it while I slept, maybe even gone through my notebook without me realizing. My room didn't feel safe anymore. Nothing did. Then, one night, something happened that made my fear turn into sheer terror. I woke up to the sound of my window creaking open again, but this time, instead of finding it ajar with no explanation, I saw her, Vanessa, climbing into my room from the balcony, her nightgown billowing in the wind, her hair wild, her eyes glowing with something unearthly in the moonlight. I froze as she crouched at the edge of my bed, her smile stretching wider than I thought humanly possible. She whispered, "It's almost time, Brielle," and then slipped out as silently as she came, leaving the window wide. Open rain blowing and soaking my carpet, I wanted to scream to wake my dad. But something in her eyes told me she wanted me to. She wanted me to look crazy hysterical, so I bit my tongue and sat there trembling until dawn. The next morning, Vanessa acted as though nothing had happened, chatting on the phone, making pancakes. Laughing with my dad while I sat at the table with dark circles under my eyes, shaking from exhaustion and fear. I knew I couldn't take it anymore. I started planning my escape, but not the kind of escape Vanessa wanted. I wasn't going to run away. No, that would mean she won. Instead, I decided I had to fight back to expose her somehow, even if it meant risking everything. But before I could put any plan into action, Vanessa struck again, harder than ever. My father came home one evening looking furious, holding up a letter he claimed came from my college. According to the letter, I was failing all my classes, missing assignments, and on the verge of expulsion. I knew instantly it was fake. I'd been doing well, keeping up with everything, but Vanessa had convinced him otherwise. She even showed him fake emails from my professors. My dad yelled at me for hours, saying I was throwing my future away, that Vanessa was the only one holding this family together. That night after he stormed off to bed, Vanessa cornered me in the hallway, leaned in close, and whispered, "You see how easy it is to take everything from you? Soon you'll have nothing left, not even him." Her words burned into me, fueling my anger, my determination. But as much as I wanted to strike back, the truth was I was terrified. I was living in a house with a woman who wanted me erased, and every day she grew bolder, more reckless. The accidents increased, sharp glass shards left on the floor of my room. Cleaning chemicals poured into my laundry, making me cough violently, and once I found broken pieces of a razor tucked into my shoes. I couldn't prove any of it, but I knew exactly who was behind it, and yet the more I tried to resist, the more isolated I became. My friends stopped calling. My father barely spoke to me except to scold, and Vanessa basked in her victory, parading me as the troubled daughter, while she played the perfect wife. The breaking point came one rainy evening when I walked into the kitchen and found my father unconscious on the floor. Vanessa stood over him holding a glass of wine, her face twisted in mock horror as she screamed my name, accusing me of poisoning him. My blood turned to ice as she dialed 911, tears streaming down her face, and I realized she wasn't just after me, she was after him too, and she was going to frame me for it. My hands shook as the sirens grew closer, and as the paramedics rushed in, Vanessa clung to them, sobbing, telling them how much she feared for her life. Living under the same roof as me, my father was rushed to the hospital, his life hanging by a thread, and I stood there helpless, watching Vanessa weave her story, painting me as a monster. That night, as I sat alone in my room, sirens echoing in my ears, I understood the horrible truth. Vanessa wasn't going to stop until she destroyed everything I loved, and the next move she made would either end my life or force me to end hers. The night my father was rushed to the hospital changed everything, not just because his life dangled in the balance, but because for the first time, I saw just how far Vanessa was willing to go. How precise and deliberate her cruelty had become, how she had crafted a plan so flawless that every single piece made me look like the villain and her the grieving, loving wife, and no matter how desperately I tried to explain, no one would listen. At the hospital, Vanessa never left his side, clutching his hand, weeping into his chest, whispering words of devotion that made nurses pity her, while I stood frozen in the corner, a silent shadow, every eye in the room darting to me with suspicion. She had told them I tried to poison him. She had painted me as unstable, dangerous, and when the police came to question me, Vanessa placed her hand gently on one of the officer's arms and whispered, "Please just make sure she gets the help she needs." That was her brilliance. She didn't scream, she didn't rage, she played the role of the selfless martyr, the stepmother burdened with a troubled stepdaughter, and it worked. The officers didn't arrest me that night, but they warned me that an investigation would be ongoing. And the look they gave me said everything. They thought I was guilty. I wanted to scream the truth, to grab them and force them to see through her act, but every time I opened my mouth, Vanessa's crocodile tears drowned me out. When my father finally regained consciousness 2 days later, the damage was done. His first words weren't to ask about me, but to thank Vanessa for saving him. She had told him I was the one who left the wine glass on the counter, that I was experimenting with drugs and alcohol, that I was reckless, and that I must have spiked the drink by mistake. My father, weak and weary, looked at me with an expression I will never forget, disappointment mixed with something colder, like he didn't recognize me anymore. I wanted to fall to my knees to beg him to see the truth, but Vanessa stood there, one hand on his chest, the other holding mine tightly like a steel trap, smiling sweetly at the nurses as if to say, "See? I have everything under control. That smile haunted me more than anything else. Back at the house, the atmosphere was unbearable. My father was recovering, fragile and tired, while Vanessa used his weakness as leverage to control everything. She told him I was stressing him out, that I needed to be sent away for treatment. One evening I overheard her making a call to some kind of facility, her voice soft and persuasive as she asked about admission forms and long-term stays. My blood ran cold as I realized what she was planning: to lock me away, to erase me completely from the picture so she could have my father, the house, and his money all to herself. Panic set in, but it also lit a fire inside me. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her succeed in erasing me the way she erased my mother's belongings, the way she was erasing my father's. Well, I knew I had to find proof, something undeniable that even Vanessa couldn't twist, so I started digging while she was busy with my father. I searched her drawers, her closet, her handbag, anything that might give me a clue. At first, I found nothing but receipts, makeup, and clothing tags, but then tucked inside an old jewelry box, I found a flash drive. My hands trembled as I slipped it into my laptop, praying it wasn't locked. To my shock, it wasn't. Inside were dozens of files, documents, photos, even recordings. My eyes widened as I realized what I was looking at. Proof that Vanessa had done this before. There were bank statements from another man's account, pictures of her with a different family, and even a scanned copy of a marriage certificate with another man's name. It was like staring into the face of a serial predator. A woman who had married, manipulated, and drained men before disappearing with everything they owned. My stomach twisted as I clicked through the files, each one confirming what I had feared all along. Vanessa wasn't just cruel, she was dangerous, calculated, a black widow, spinning webs of destruction around anyone unlucky enough to love her. But before I could copy the files, before I could send them to anyone, I heard her voice behind me. "What do you think you're doing?" My blood turned to ice as I spun around to see Vanessa standing in the doorway, her eyes blazing with fury, her hands clenched into fist. She had caught me red-handed. I tried to slam the laptop shut, but she lunged forward, yanking it away with terrifying strength. For a split second, our eyes locked, and I saw the mask slip completely. The sweet smile was gone, replaced by pure hatred. "You shouldn't have done that," she hissed before smashing the laptop against the wall, shattering it into pieces. My heart pounded in my chest as she leaned in close, her voice low and venomous. "If you ever try that again, you won't wake up the next morning." I barely slept that night, every sound making me jolt awake, convinced she was coming for me. And yet, as terrified as I was, the fire inside me only grew stronger. I had seen the proof, I knew the truth, and even if the files were destroyed, I couldn't let her win. I started planning in secret, keeping notes hidden in places she would never look, memorizing the details. I had read and preparing myself for the moment I would strike back, but Vanessa seemed to sense my resistance, and her tactics grew even more sinister. One night, I woke up choking, the air thick with smoke. I bolted upright to find my curtains smoldering, flames licking at the edges. I screamed, dousing them with water, and when I turned around, I saw her standing in the doorway, holding a box of matches, her expression eerily calm. She didn't say a word, just watched me until the fire was out, then walked away as though nothing had happened. My father, fast asleep under his medication, never even stirred. I realized then that Vanessa wasn't afraid of being caught. She was confident no one would believe me no matter what I said, and she was right. When I tried to tell my father about the fire the next morning, he looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Brielle, please stop making up stories. You're hurting Vanessa and you're hurting me." His words cut deeper than any knife. Vanessa stood behind him, her hands on his shoulders, her face the picture of innocence, and when he turned away, she winked at me. That tiny gesture, that smug confidence, nearly broke me, but instead of crumbling, I swore to myself that I would find a way to end this nightmare once and for all. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house became unbearable. Vanessa tightened her control, watching me constantly, making sure I couldn't step out of line. But one night, fate handed me an opportunity. She left her phone unattended on the counter while she went to check on my father, and without thinking, I grabbed it and ran to my room. My hands shook as I scrolled through her messages, and what I found made my stomach churn. Long text threads with someone named D discussing money transfers, fake identities, and even explicit details about how she planned to finish the job soon. I took pictures of everything, backing them up to a cloud account, so she couldn't erase them this time. My heart pounded with a mix of fear and hope. This was it, the proof I needed. But just as I was about to sneak the phone back, Vanessa stormed into my room, her face twisted with rage. She lunged at me, clawing at my arms, screaming that I had ruined everything. The struggle was violent, primal, and for a moment I thought she was going to strangle knee right there on the floor, but then she stopped, her chest heaving, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You've made a mistake you can't take back," she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "If you thought the fire was bad, just wait, you haven't seen anything yet." That night I barely slept, clutching my phone to my chest, my mind racing. I had the proof now, undeniable evidence of her schemes, but Vanessa wasn't going to give me another chance. I could feel it in the way she watched me, in the way she hovered outside my door, in the way she smiled too sweetly at breakfast the next morning. She was planning something final, something irreversible, and I knew with a bone-deep certainty that the next move she made would determine everything. Whether I lived to expose her, or whether Vanessa would finally erase me from this world the way she always wanted. Tension in the house had reached a point where even the silence felt dangerous, every creak of the floorboards sounding like a warning, every flicker of light carrying the threat of something darker lurking in the shadows. And though I had gathered proof of Vanessa's lies through her text messages and shady dealings, the truth was that proof meant nothing if I didn't survive long enough to use it. I could feel her eyes on me constantly, the way she lingered at the edge of the hallway, the way her smile seemed carved into her face as if she was daring me to make the first move. And the more days passed, the clearer it became that Vanessa wasn't waiting anymore. She was preparing to strike. My father, weak and recovering, spent most of his days resting under the influence of medications that Vanessa carefully managed for him, and I suspected she was slowly increasing his dosages, dragging him deeper into dependency so he'd never be strong enough to question her again. I knew time was running out, that if I didn't act soon, both of us would be gone, one erased by lies and the other consumed by her poison. I spent hours locked in my room, scrolling through the screenshots I had saved to the cloud, whispering to myself that this was enough, that I just had to get out of the house, contact the police, and show them everything. But Vanessa seemed to know my every thought, my every move, and one evening, as the rain pounded against the window, she came into my room, carrying a tray of soup, her face glowing with sickly sweetness. "Eat up, Brielle," she said softly. "You'll need your strength." I stared at the bowl, at the faint bitter scent rising from it, and I knew instantly it wasn't food. It was her final attempt. My stomach twisted as she set the tray down, her smile widening when she saw my hesitation. "What's the matter, sweetheart? Don't you trust your stepmother?" Her voice was mocking, daring me to call her out, but instead of touching the spoon, I looked her straight in the eyes and whispered, "I know everything, Vanessa. I know about the others. I know about the money. And I know you tried to kill Dad." For the first time, her smile faltered, her mask slipping, just enough for me to see the monster underneath, and then she laughed, a hollow, chilling sound that echoed in the room. "And who do you think will believe? You? You're just a broken little girl with no one left on our side. I've won, Brielle. You should have learned by now that no one ever believes the victim." Her words sent fire through me, burning away the fear that had chained me for months. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't invincible. She wasn't untouchable. She was just a predator who thrived on silence, on control, and if I wanted to end this, I had to stop being silent. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, holding it up to show her the screen where I had recorded our entire conversation, her confession spilling out in clear audio. For the first time, true panic crossed her face, her eyes darting between me and the phone, her perfect composure cracking. She lunged at me, knocking the phone from my hands, and we struggled, violently crashing into the dresser, the mirror shattering around us, glass slicing into my arms. Her hands wrapped around my throat, squeezing tighter and tighter as she hissed, "You should have stayed quiet." My vision blurred, black spots dancing in front of my eyes, but somewhere in the chaos, I felt the shard of glass under my hand, and with the last ounce of strength I drove it into her shoulder. She screamed, stumbling back, her grip loosening enough for me to break free. I scrambled for the phone, blood on my hands, adrenaline roaring in my ears, and as she lunged again, I bolted from the room, racing down the stairs, her footsteps pounding behind me. I could barely breathe as I slammed the front door open and screamed into the night, the storm soaking me instantly, my voice hoarse as I yelled for help. Neighbors' lights flicked on, voices shouting, and just as Vanessa reached me, her hands clawing at my hair, flashing red and blue lights filled the driveway. The police had arrived. Everything after that blurred into chaos, officers pulling Vanessa off me as she screamed curses, her sweet facade finally gone, her face twisted with rage. Paramedics rushing into the house to check on my father, who was found nearly unconscious from over-medication. And me clutching my phone, sobbing, forcing the words out through my tears. "I have proof, it's all here. She tried to kill us." Hours later at the station, I played the recordings for them, showed them the screenshots of her messages, the files from her phone, and for the first time, someone finally listened. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and the mask Vanessa had worn so carefully for years crumbled. Under the weight of the truth, she was arrested that night, charged not only with attempted murder, but with fraud, identity theft, and a string of crimes tied to her past victims. My father, though weak, eventually recovered his health, improving once. Vanessa's grip on him was broken, and though his eyes were heavy with guilt every time he looked at me, I knew the blame wasn't his. He'd been a prisoner of her manipulation just like I had. Weeks that followed were a blur of court hearings, police interviews, and sleepless nights filled with nightmares of Vanessa's hands around my throat, her whisper in the dark, her laugh echoing in my ears. But slowly, painfully, I began to heal my father, and I started rebuilding our relationship. Piece by fragile piece, and for the first time in years, our home felt like ours again, not a stage for Vanessa's twisted performance. Yet even as I moved forward, even as Vanessa was sentenced to spend decades behind bars, I knew the scars she left on me would never fully fade. Sometimes, when the house creaks at night, I still jolt awake, my heart racing, convinced she's standing at the foot of my bed again. Sometimes I catch myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting her emerald eyes to be staring back at me, but then I remind myself of the truth. I survived, I fought back, and though she tried to erase me, she failed. This is my story, my survival, and my warning to anyone who thinks evil always comes from strangers. Sometimes it lives right inside your home, smiling at you, hugging you, calling itself family. Thanks for watching and listening to my story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries.